Hello everybody, this is Michelle Fox and welcome back to the Simple Quilter. Today I'm going to be talking about scrap management and showing you how I store and manage the scraps in my quilt room. Now in the comments below, I'd like for you to tell me how you manage your scraps in your quilt room. So please be sure to put that in the comment section below. In my quilt room, I have 4 basic storage areas. And the first one occurs right at my cutting table, and I film using my cutting table, so it's typically right here in front of me. So I'm going to show you how I use the things right here at my cutting table first. Now here at my cutting table is a very important method for controlling my scraps, and I've talked to you about this before and I've showed you this, but we're going to cover this again. Right here on a little handle that cranks up my table is a little bag. And as I'm cutting, I put all the little tiny scraps that I'm not going to keep, that I'm going to put in my dog beds right here. So it's right there at my fingertips. I cut and you'll see me do this. And what I'm doing is I'm putting scraps into a little bag, and later I'll dump those into my dog bed bucket. Now under my table I keep a little trash can that holds scraps. Now these scraps, some of them are bigger than 1.5 inches to 2 inches, but these are scraps that I choose not to manage, and they go in here, and this is a dog bed. So when this gets full, I simply sew it up and then it's ready to leave my quilt room. So that's how I manage the scraps that aren't going to go into my storage system here in my quilt room. Because once this is full and I sew this up, it goes out of my quilt room. Now my little bag always stays right here. And this always stays right under my cutting table. So again, this is an important piece of my scrap management system here in my quilt room. So the second storage area in my quilt room for my scraps is right here in this cabinet. And I've shown you this before, but for those of you that are new, I wanted to show you this. Once I reorganized my quilt room a year or so ago, I put my scrap bins here, and this has worked out great. I don't get in here just a lot, and it's up high. These boxes are light and easy to access. But in this cabinet, I have 10 buckets like this, and each is labeled with a color or colors. Like I put pink and purple together, but that's what these are for. Then I have a bucket that when I finish a project, I just put the scraps that I want to enter into my storage system in this bucket. And as you can see, this is full. And I'm going to show you what I do when this bucket gets full. Okay, so here on my cutting table are all of the buckets that came out of my cabinet. Now some of these buckets are really full, like this one. This one is my black bin. Now, when this is full, I don't add any more to it. If I want to add more to it, I have to take those scraps out and put them in my dog bed system. Now, some of you like to keep everything, and that's okay. But I prefer not to do that, simply because I need to maintain the clutter in my quilt room. And by keeping my scraps limited to these buckets, that's how I try to do it. Now I do have a couple other containers I'm going to show you in a little bit, but this was my second storage area, and I wanted to show you how I do this. Now when I'm doing a project, a quilt project, and I get done with that, I immediately put all the leftover scraps that I want to enter into my storage system into this bucket. Now, when this bucket gets full, then I have to empty it out. So that's what I'm going to do now. And I'm just going to start putting these in here. Pink and purple, that goes in the green container. Now, items like this are always a conundrum for me. Where do I put them? So I'm actually going to put this in my orphan block box, because I could cut this up for sashings, or I may use this to make a mug rug. So that's going to go in my orphan block container, and I'll show you that in a bit. Okay, so I'm just going to keep moving here. come across something that has multiple colors like this, I take the color that's most prominent. And I think I'm going to put that in with the yellows. These are always a little hard for me to do, but I'm going to put that in with the yellows. And I do have a container for black and white. And with my browns, and these will go in my cream and white. Now look how quick that was. My bucket is empty. And when I do finish a project, you could see I had piles of pinks together. When I finish a project, I do kind of sort them into colors quickly, and then I toss them in here. Okay, so since this bucket is kind of full and I'm not sure I can get the lid on, I'm just going to show you quickly what I'm going to do. I'm just going to start to sort through here just a little bit. Now here's some grays. These are small pieces. I'm going to just put those in my dog beds. Here's some grays. I'm going to keep those. Oh look, there's a piece of that. I'm going to be doing a binding with that. I'm actually going to set that to the side because I'm going to be doing a binding with that. Okay, I'm going to just take out some of these blacks. Here's some pieces that are pretty small that I don't think I'm going to be using. That can go in my black and white piece. I think I'm going to put that into my dog beds. These are small. Put those in there. Those are binding strips. That's kind of long. I'm going to actually put those in my binding bucket. Okay, now that's done, and I'm going to be able to put the lid on more easily. It's still pretty full, but that's okay. I can get the lid on, and that's what I'm most concerned about. Now these are going in my dog bed bin. I'm going to cut these up into 2.5-inch strips for bindings, or put those in my 2.5-inch strip buckets, and this is going to go in my binding bucket. So that's how I manage this system. Now see, I really probably need to clean this green bucket out. It's pretty full too. I'm going to save that for another time though. Or this is the second storage area for my scraps, and this is how I manage the scraps in this area. Now this is the third storage area in my quilt room. This is the cart that sits right next to my ironing board when I'm working. I do move things around a little bit when I'm filming just for convenience sake, but anyway, in this top drawer I keep my pre-cut scraps, and I don't have a lot in here, but I keep 2.5-inch squares. I keep, these are 5-inch strips that I've cut that I can subcut into charm squares. And then I keep these little pre-cuts, these little pieces cut, and these are what I, sometimes when I feel like my 1/4 inch seam allowance is off, I'll take 3 of these and sew them together and test my seam allowance. And then I have 3.5-inch squares, but as you can see, I don't keep many. And sometimes when I do a project and I have a large amount of pre-cut square, this is a pre-cut rectangle, I will put those in here. But I don't have a lot of pre-cuts in here. But I will tell you, the 2.5-inch squares have come in super handy. I use those for cornerstones. I've used those for the heart quilts, like this quilt block that you see right here that I used in one of my previous videos. So I don't keep very many pre-cuts, but those go in here. In this box, I will just toss scrap binding pieces. In fact, I'm going to add 2 that I just took out of my other, and I kind of like to put them according to color. And then, I don't know if this is really part of my scrap storage system, but I'll put orphan blocks here. And I'm going to put those strips here that I might make some mug rugs out of in here. And that's the third part of my storage system. Now this is my 4th and last storage area, and this is the area where I keep my pre-cut 2.5-inch strips that I've either cut or that have been left from jelly rolls. And I have 4 containers. Now this is my red and blue container, and at one time this was totally full, and that's all I have left. And the reason that's all I have left is because I've made 2 quilts using these, and you've seen me use these in the projects that I've done, so I really don't have very much in my red and blue bin. This is my red and blue bin. Then this is my white and off-white bin, and as you can see, that's pretty empty because I do use these 2.5 strips to make a lot of different quilts. 2.5-inch strips are great for sashings. They're great for the log cabin courthouse quilt that I made. I've used them for the borders on the hearts that I've recently made and showed you a video on. So those are running low. But when I'm cutting fabric, and say I have a little bit left of a background fabric, sometimes I will cut it into 2.5 strips, then it comes out of my stash and goes into my storage system. These are just miscellaneous colors that I have. I have some brights in here, some blacks, and then this box is my last box. And these have pre-cuts that kind of coordinate together. These came from jelly rolls, and so these kind of coordinate. And I was thinking this morning as I was looking at all this and kind of reviewing what all I was going to talk about, I really need to make a quilt out of these. So anyway, this is how I store my 2.5-inch strips for the scraps in my room. Just a reminder, all of the t-shirts that I wear in my videos can be found at the So Many Quilty Things Etsy website listed in the description below. Be sure to use the 15% off coupon for quilting and sewing apparel. Now, just in summary, those were the 4 areas in my quilt room where I store my scraps. And as you can tell, I do have a limit on what I keep, simply because I have to manage the clutter in my quilt room so that I can be productive. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't. Please leave a comment. Please don't forget to tell me how you manage your scraps in your quilt room. And until next time, have fun quilting.